All right, welcome back. We got our weekly stock market update and a very interesting week this week. Some of the big news, we have oil dropping, which is phenomenal. Oil closed below $90 a barrel, so that's a great sign to see. Interest rates did pull back a little bit, but they are still on the high side. And this week we had a software bounce and a lot of the beat up software names and a lot of AI news, a lot of AI narrative is shifting, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then we do have SpaceX IPO, which is coming June 12th, is when their potential for them to go live. So they're looking at a $1.7 trillion valuation. We don't know the share price yet, and we'll know more as we get closer to June 12th. But some of these big IPOs, SpaceX, OpenAI, Anthropic, look to be coming live this year. So SpaceX will be the first big one and the biggest IPO ever. Market all-time high this week. S&P, Nasdaq, Dow Jones, I believe, also hit an all-time high. But just record close, and the month of May was just an absolute ripper of a month. So Nasdaq up 8%, S&P up 5%, and the Dow Jones up 3%. So we talked about oil, we talked about interest rates. It's nice to see them pull back, but they're still elevated. Oil's the big mover here. If we can get oil to stay below $90 for a while, that's going to be great. So this week we have the hardware names continuing to rip. We'll look at the charts in just a moment. But yeah, AMD, Micron, NVIDIA, all still holding up very well. And this week we also saw some of these software names get a nice move. So Snowflake had earnings, they were up 50% this week. Okta was up 30% on Friday, and CrowdStrike is at an all-time high of 731. 50% move on CrowdStrike in just May. And the IGV, this is the software ETF, it was up 21% in May. So a lot of these charts still look pretty beat up. Obviously, cybersecurity is the outlier, especially CrowdStrike. I believe CrowdStrike has earnings this week, so we'll see what happens there. But software making a nice bounce. So my take is I don't think software is dead. I do think there are going to be a handful of names that continue to get crushed. Things were just overdone. The fear was overdone on this SaaS apocalypse where AI was going to just eat every software product out there. And CrowdStrike is the perfect example. AI is going to supplement what CrowdStrike does. It can't replace it, but I do think there are some companies like Adobe that are going to get replaced or heavily, their moat is going to get heavily eroded away because of AI. So Microsoft is the big name. This has been my biggest ad over the last couple of months, or I'd say the last couple of weeks, and I will look to continue to buy some more Microsoft. I've never been a huge fan of this company. It's been the boring big technology name, but the valuation is great, and I think they're going to be a huge beneficiary of AI. And there's also a couple other announcements that they came out this week with partnerships with NVIDIA. So we'll see what they say. I believe on Monday, there's a big conference in Taipei where NVIDIA, ARM, Microsoft, and I think a couple other companies are going to announce their new PC, which sounds like they're going to have high-end chips in some of these laptops and computers that are going to process AI on your computer. So you won't have to necessarily spend so much on API tokens to send your tokens to some data center somewhere. You can process some of the compute on your computer, which is going to be, I think, where the world is heading because of the AI cost, which we're going to talk about right now. So this week in AI, we have a very different narrative shift. So where we started off was in February, AI was going to kill all jobs and destroy everything. It was going to cannibalize the whole world. Software, anything was going to get automated by AI, and that's where we saw money getting allocated to. Where we're at now is AI costs too much, and is it worth using all these tokens where are you getting the return on your investment because the price of electricity has gone up, compute is scarce, RAM is expensive, all the chips have gone up in price, so AI has gone up in price. If you use an API, you realize what's going on here, but if you're using a ChatGPT subscription and not hitting your limits, you don't realize that you're being subsidized on the cost what it takes to run your subscription. So if you're paying $100 a month for ChatGPT, you're probably in reality costing ChatGPT $400 or $500 in compute. When you hook it up to an API where you're paying per token, then you really get to see how much your AI actually costs. And Claude and Anthropic is the killer here. They are very expensive because their models are so big and they are limited on compute. ChatGPT is really subsidizing a lot of the compute and token usage that's out there. Eventually, that's going to change, and mostly enterprises are going to be pay per token. I think they're still going to subsidize the consumer, and they're going to make their money on the enterprise side. So this week, Uber, their AI budget was $3.4 billion. They burned through that in 4 months. And so the CFO or someone from Uber came out and said, we're putting a pause on some of our AI projects because it's just costing us too much and they're not seeing the return. Yeah, they're getting some efficiency, but it's not worth the cost that they're, paying an AI token. So there's going to be a shift there. I think the shift is going to be on-prem AI. It's going to be a company like Uber building mini data centers in their offices and running local models on their own compute in the office. That way, they're paying for the hardware and they're not necessarily having to pay somebody for the GPUs and the tokens and electricity and all that. They're going to bring some of that in-house and find models that'll work for their processes. So I think that's where we're going. And I think that's where the individual should look to upgrade their PCs and run their own models the best they can, and then use the APIs when they need to. So we're not quite there yet, but I think a lot of these companies are starting to figure this out, and they'll find a workaround from that. So we're in this vibe shift here, and I think how things keep shifting back and forth from week to week, month to month, I think this really just reiterates how early we are in this stage. 1 week AI is going to kill everybody. The next week AI is, too expensive and we're just going to use humans, so those jobs come back. So it's a very interesting shift this week, and I think we're going to see another shift back to the other side again down the road when models come out to be cheaper, better, faster, all that. So NVIDIA Microsoft partnership, the era of a new PC. We'll talk about this when they make the announcement, but just know there's a big announcement coming out with Microsoft, Dell, NVIDIA, ARM, all those companies. So June 1st, Jensen will be giving a keynote speech. SpaceX, we already talked about it. Valuation seems expensive, $1.5 to $2 trillion, with a revenue of $18 billion. This is different now because they signed an $18 billion annual contract with Anthropic. So in reality, they doubled their revenue in one partnership because of their AI compute. So that is pretty interesting, but I'll do a deep dive on SpaceX. I'm going to be in Mexico for 10 days. I don't know if I'll be able to make a SpaceX video before the IPO, but yeah, I don't quite know what to think about it. It seems expensive, but also it's one of those companies that I could see a lot of retail money flying into. And if you're going to buy it, expect to hold it for 10 years, potentially before you see a return. I could also see this thing just skyrocketing on IPO day, just because there's so much demand. All right, so the risks, yields are still high. Software rally has moved quite a bit. We're going to look at some charts. We could see some profit taking, and we could see the narrative shift back because this week software had a great week. That's mainly because of the narrative shift. We're going to keep seeing the seesaw back and forth, back and forth. We still have the Iran stuff going on. I'm kind of tuned out on that until we get an actual deal. Every day it sounds like something's going to happen, nothing happens, so we'll have to wait and see. And then with these IPOs, there could be a capital drain. I'm not too certain on this, but because you're going to see all these big IPOs come out, either people are going to put new money to work and the market will be fine, but if people decide to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to sell Micron and go buy Anthropic, we could see a rotation out of some of these winners or out of some of these losers into these new IPOs, and they are big names. So where's that money going to come from that people use to buy the IPOs? If they do, could come out of the existing names, but we'll have to wait and see. So the bottom line this week was a big narrative shift. Oil dropped. The biggest decline since 2020. Software stocks had their best month since 2001, and we're getting these narrative flips on AI. I do think There is some opportunities out there, but I would say focus on the fundamentals. Don't focus too much on the fear that comes and goes. There's some real opportunities, but there's also some real risks out there. I'm not chasing anything, and I'm letting the data guide me. So let's take a look at some of these software charts. So Microsoft here, again, we've talked about this. This seemed overcooked. I get why it pulled back from all-time highs of 550, but the thought that Microsoft was dead, I think, was just way overblown. So has moved up quite a bit this week. I would expect a little bit of a pullback, and I will be adding to my Microsoft position at 420 if we can get a pullback there. This is my next resistance target that we ran right up into, so we'll see how we react from here, but I would expect a little bit of a pullback, but to me that's a buying opportunity. Palantir, another name, hasn't done anything for a couple of months now. Huge breakout these last couple of days. We'll have to wait and see here. I think this is another name where what they do, I don't think AI can replicate. I think they are an AI native company. So it's good to see this name finally get a move. Let's take a look at CrowdStrike. They do have earnings coming up Wednesday. So some of these other cybersecurity names, it's been a mixed bag. You had some of the winners like Palo Alto and Fortinet. They had really good earnings and they moved up after earnings, but we've also seen Zscaler and I believe Datadog. I think Zscaler was down 30% after earnings. So this is going to be a name by name case. I see the case here for CrowdStrike to pull back. This is just unnatural move for CrowdStrike. It's up 112% from the lows, which is unbelievable. But this is still a phenomenal company. I'm not doing anything with my shares here. We're just holding. I'm not looking to add unless we get a significant pullback. But I pretty much have my full position in this name, and there's nothing to do. I'm not selling because it's up. I like this name long term, and I don't see why this can't be a $500 billion market cap down the road. So those are some of the software names. Another name to me that is very interesting is Meta. It keeps getting rejected here in the mid 600s, but I think this name is going to be similar to Microsoft eventually. I do think we're probably going to get another washout before we move up. I think Meta is going to be a big winner in the open source AI play. As I mentioned before, I think a lot of these companies are going to be bringing AI on-prem, meaning on their premises, and they're going to need an open source model to run on their hardware. And Google, Microsoft, or I'm sorry, I think Microsoft has a model. Google, Microsoft, Meta, and NVIDIA all have models. And Meta seems to be one of the higher end models there that you can run open source and not have to use a Chinese model that is open source. Will they make money from that? Who knows? Meta also announced this week that they're going to offer some sort of subscriptions for some of their apps. We'll see if that takes off, has any legs, but this company just makes too much money and has too many eyeballs on it for it to be beat up for too long. Any other names to talk about? I mean, we can talk about Micron, past $1 trillion market cap this week, $1.1 trillion. Very interesting name. Just I'm not chasing any of these names here. Some other software names, Oracle, making a nice bounce back. Let's take a look. I think that's really about it. So pretty busy week this week. We'll finish off on oil because this is very nice to see. We're still in this trend here from mid 80s to low hundreds. So let's hope that we can get below this or just stay below 90 bucks for an extended period of time. That would be great. And the interest rates, this is a very welcome sight here. So hopefully this was just a little peak and then we're going to pull back and eventually get below this green line. We've had this green line here for a couple of years now. We want to get below this. The question will be is why do interest rates come down? Do interest rates come down because the economy is soft, or do they come down just because inflation fears are easing? Hopefully it's the interest rates, or I'm sorry, the inflation rate. So that is all I got for you guys for this video. I won't see you guys for a couple of weeks, so everyone stay safe out there, and I will talk to you all soon. All right, peace out.